A taxi charges an initial fee of $5 and $2 for each mile driven. What's going on here? Never seen a question quite like this before, but with everything we've been doing, we probably know a lot about it. Justin, what do you think? Good. I like it. What else? Yes. Sometimes taxis are based on how far you go. Can you guys take your headphones out? I don't want to have to ask every day when we start going, right? Remember that? That's our rule. No headphones during lessons. Good. Sometimes it's about how far. Sometimes it's about how long. In this case, it looks like it's per mile. But what else is happening here? What is this? What do you think about when you read that sentence, thinking about everything we've been doing lately? Benna? Very good. So I think what Savannah's saying is this looks like a linear relation. Did anybody else think that? I mean, obviously we're doing that and it says applications of linear relations up there, but like, do you recognize it? Where does it start and what's the change? There's your initial fee, $2 per mile for each mile. There's your change. Okay, very good. Now this question is a little bit different. What two variables are being compared? So by variables, there's two things that could change in this question. What are they? What's one of the things that changed, Jamarly? Yeah, miles. We could call that M or N for number of miles. We often use N, but you could use M for miles. Yeah, money. Money. Or what else do we call that? Cost. Total cost. And so for that, we'll use C. Something else that I think we've probably talked about before, but I'm just going to I'll mention it again. This is a small detail. It's not, but it is something that you could start thinking about. If we use a capital C, you got to keep using a capital C. You can't change it. If we're using a small m, you use a small m. You can't change it. In mathematics, it's different if you change something from a small letter to a big letter. Okay? Which value above is the rate? So what do you think the rate is in this question, or what do you think the change is? Miles, but which value? Oh, miles is one of the variables, so it's not the rate. 2. Because it's when we're thinking about the change in these things, it's a number. What's the initial amount? Kaden? Yeah, 5. And if I want to add units, this would be like dollars per mile. And as Kaden said, this one would be $5. I don't know that you need units there, but if you were, then you could think about that too. Now we're going to write an equation. So what does an equation look like? So it's total cost equals. A lot of people, or some people, always forget that first part of the equation. And I will always remind you, and you might eventually lose half a mark on a test or something like that if you forget it over and over and over again, because it is part of an equation. But for now, just try to remember it. Every time you forget it, go, oh yeah, right, I'm supposed to include that too. Because you always want to have 2 variables. Who can do the rest of this? Savannah? Plus 2m or n or whatever you use. Very good. I love it. Anybody else have that already? Nice. Show a rough sketch of the graph of this relationship. What does this mean? If you're ever asked to do this, it means it starts somewhere above 0. So if it started at 0, I would show it starting at 0. And I'm actually going to write the number that it starts at. And I'm just going to show a line that it goes up from there. I can't really, I'm not doing a grid. Notice I'm not trying to draw grid lines in. It's a rough sketch. This is total cost. And this is number of miles. And I'm just showing that it starts not at 0 and then goes up. So if it started not at 0 and goes down, I would have to draw it that way. If it started at 0, I'd have to make sure I included that in the graph. Okay. So that's like what we mean by a rough sketch. We're just thinking about generally what would it look like. So we started this process where I gave you a table and you could come up with the rule or the graph. We also looked at, what if I gave you the rule? Now that was back before we had done a lot of this, so you might not remember it, but we did do that. If I gave you the rule, you could make a table and then you could make the graph. Now what we're looking at is words. What if we describe the situation in words? How does that relate to the table and the graph and the rule and all of that stuff? So we're switching between, and I'm gonna tell you right now, those are the 4 representations that we do in this course. You need to know all 4. You need to know how to start with one and move to the others for all of them. So rule, words, table, and graph. Those are the 4. Okay, let's take a look at the next question. For a pizza at Campus Pizza, the cost in dollars C of a large pizza with N toppings is given by the following equation. So this one's giving us the rule, but it's asking us to think about what the rule means in terms of words. When you look at that, before we even start to read the ABCD, when we look at this, what does it make you think? Why do you think that? Why not the other way around? Okay, very good. I like it. That's great. I love it. Sam? N are the toppings. So that's the part that changes per topping. Thinking about that. Very good. What else? Jamarli, you had your hand up. Huh? You were going to say that? What about the 15 makes us think it's the cost of the pizza before toppings? It might be obvious, but that's okay. It's okay to say that. What do you think? Donovan, what do you think? Because there is no variable. It's just 15. So it's just the initial cost. And then each topping has a cost after that. So let's read through. The base cost of the pizza is $3, and the cost per topping is $15. What do you think? That's a no. The base cost of the pizza is $18, and the cost per topping is $3. Why do you think somebody might think that one's true? So maybe they thought you had to add a topping in to start or whatever, but that's not the case. You start with 0 toppings, just a cheese pizza, I guess. Sometimes we do questions where it doesn't make sense to start at 0, like a taxi drive. Why would you get in a taxi and drive 0 miles? You just pay them $5 and get back out and walk away? Like nobody would do that, right? So it doesn't make sense, but the mathematics still says for 0 miles would cost you $5 or whatever it is. So sometimes math doesn't fit common sense of the world, but we still we don't force the math to change. We just know nobody would pay that. Okay. Base cost of the pizza is $15. The cost per topping is $3. There we go. So we found it. And what about the total cost for a large pizza with 2 toppings is $33. That's backwards. That's 15 times 2 plus 3. What would a large pizza with 2 toppings be? What would that cost? 21. 15 plus 6. $3 per topping. 2 toppings is $6. Very good. So we got it. C. Nice. Let's move on. Following equation represents the total cost to rent a jet ski at Wasaga Beach, where C is the total cost and T is the time in hours. Write a sentence that explains each of the values in the equation. 20T plus 50. Before you write your sentence, let's talk about this. When you look at that equation, what does it make you think? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to turn and talk to the person you're sitting beside or the 2 people you're sitting beside and quickly say to them what you think it means. Donovan, what do you think? No, what do you think? about that? Did you hear what he said? Walker, what do you think? What did you guys talk about? Yes? 20 hours is $50? Okay, good. What else? Jacob, what did you guys talk about?
Thought that the initial cost was $50.
Why did you think that?
Because there's no variable.
So that's remember when we were talking about linear equations, it's all about where does it start and what's the change. See, the start is 50, so that's the initial cost. So it's right out of the gates to rent a jet ski, pay $50. $50 up front. Good. What else? Marley? Every hour you pay $20. Does that make sense? Okay, I want you to write that on your page. Go ahead and write your own sentence now that for both of those that you think fits. Sam, what did you write for that first one? What did you write your first sentence? Very nice. The initial cost is $50 because that's the one without the variable. Good. Who can do the second part for me? Very nice. For each hour you use it, you pay $20. So you might have said that sentence slightly differently, but you want to make sure you're saying the same kind of thing. It's $20 per hour or $20 for each hour, something along those lines. Awesome. Okay, one more. To place an ad in the classified section of a newspaper, there's a fixed cost of $15 and a charge of $10 per day the ad is to be run. Here's another one of those ones that would you ever pay for 0 days? No. So some people think you add those together to get the initial cost. 15 and 10 is 25. No, but we don't do that mathematically. Okay? You're right. You're never going to pay less than $25 because you're always going to at least pay for 1 day. That is true. However, our graph is still going to start at 0. So which amount is the rate, the 15 or the 10? And how do you know? I see a lot of people are already doing it. Ashton, what do you think? Which amount is the rate? How do you know? Like, how did you know? Ah, so you thought that one's fixed, so the other one's not. Very nice. See how it's good to hear other people's thinking. How else could you figure out that the 10 is the rate?
Because it says 10 per day.
Because it says per. The word per tells us what's going on here. Okay, good. $10 per day. Which is the initial amount? Okay. Very good. And so maybe you already knew what the rate was, so the other amount. What if a question gave you 3 numbers and one of them is irrelevant? You know what I mean? Sometimes they do that to try to trick you. So you still do have to read carefully, right? Write an equation that gives a rule between 2 variables. What variables should we choose? Variables. What letters should we use? We're going to use 10 and 15, yeah? So A, so we can use A for add and C for cost. So the cost of an add equals, good. What other variables could you use? We don't have to use the same. Yes, you could always use X. That's a common one we use in math class. I love it.
I used N.
Used N. Why?
No reason, just I didn't know.
Okay, good. What else? Maybe. I mean, folks, you could use anything here. You could draw a picture of a flower as a variable. Like, there's nothing special about the letters. They don't need to stand for something. So, Marley, what do you think? Oh, you know? Why D? Yeah, it can be useful to think about what the variable represents. That might be something you want to think about. D for days. Good. Can somebody fill in the rest for me? Somebody who hasn't shared much yet. Jacob, did you do it? Before we even do this, what does an equation, what does a rule look like? Go back and find a rule. Look, there's one. We're trying to write that. Where does it start? What's the change? We already identified where does it start, the initial amount. What's the change? Walker, what do you think? 10x plus 15. And x could have been any of those other letters. A for add, D for day, N for number of days, any of those things. Sam? Very good question. Is it okay to do 15 plus 10? Is that missing something though? 10D. What do you think? Yes, definitely. Yep, both of those are fine. The order in which you add doesn't change things. If Simone runs an ad in this newspaper for 6 days, find her total cost. So this is where I get cost equals 10 times the number of days plus 15. That's 6. Or if I use the other equation, it would be C equals 15 plus 10 times 6. Does it help writing them out like this and see how... That's not going to make a difference which way I write it, does it? I'm going to show you one more thing after, though. So what is 10 times 6? 60 plus 15, or 15 plus 60. And that works out to $75. Therefore, $75 for 6 days. That's a lot of money, but ads and papers are actually very expensive. This one's 75 as well. What if I did this, though? I'm going to do it in red because it's wrong. What if I did the cost is 15 times the number of days plus 10? Does anybody have a calculator and you can do 15 times 6? What is it? 90? So with the wrong rule, I got a different answer because I put the D in the wrong place. Right? So that makes a difference, but the order in which you write them doesn't make a difference. Any questions about this?